So excited today. We have a beautiful guest joining us, Deja Shania. She's an amazing woman I've been connected to on Instagram for some time now, doing powerful healing and reclamation work. But don't let me tell you about her because she's here to tell you herself. Deja, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you for having me, Lisa Maria. Thank you.
Well, why don't we get started and get things kicked off by having you share with us how you identify what you do, how you identify your roles, and tell us a little bit about your work.
So I'll start by giving the official sort of spiel, and then we can dive deeper into the nuances. How does that sound?
Sounds amazing.
So, hello everyone. My name is Deja Shania. I am an Afro-Indigenous bushwoman, which is a lineage of a Caribbean naturopath. I'm a somatic guide, a women's health specialist, and holistic business mentor from the US Virgin Islands. I help female execs and high achievers harness Afro-Indigenous medicine to heal their bodies of stress and create the lives that really light them up. I am a big advocate for a sustainable feminine life and legacy. So I infuse that ethos into everything that I do.
Amazing, amazing. There's so much. There's so much to unpack today. I know that the listeners are excited. So am I. Deja, I know that you come from a lineage of healers, as you referenced. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that means, the women of your heritage, and how that's impacted you?
Mm. On a foundational level, the women of my heritage, they raised me before I even knew what words to call what I experienced growing up, what I was guided in. I really just saw these women as guides to how to live my life in harmony with myself, with God, and with the world around me. So, a bush woman is very simply a woman who lives in the bush. And I
Mm.
think this is how many of our ancestors, lived their lives in tune with nature, growing food, harvesting herbs, making medicines to help preserve a way of living. And I'm very grateful and lucky and blessed because I have a grandmother on my mother's side, so my maternal grandmother, who is so dedicated to this. It just pours out of her in everything that she
Mm.
does. And she's learned from her grandmother and her mother, and it's gone back, I think, forever. I know that's that's probably not the most accurate thing to say, but um and she was just very excited to show us growing up
Mm.
what she learned. And we were excited to learn, although it's not necessarily so uh, needed in the modern world. Like, my grandmother, when she was really young and active, raised animals and children and grew most of the food that her family ate and took care of a
Wow.
house, and also had this training as a nurse and infused that with the medicine that she learned ancestrally to serve women and to guide them through the changes of their lives through birth and postpartum. So I really think just the beingness of what a woman is has influenced my lineage.
Mm.
Yeah.
That is beautiful. The beingness of what a woman is has influenced my lineage. That's a keeper right there. And you are so blessed to know so much about your lineage because there are a lot of women. I'm one of them, so I guess I'm that voice in this conversation of women who don't have as much knowledge or didn't have as much contact with women from prior generations for a variety of reasons, in our upbringing. And I know many of us yearn for that experience of having touched history in a sense and been intimately trained in the ways of the past and handed the baton in a sense from previous generations. It's so powerful. And in your case, you have this ancestral medicine. So can you help us understand a little bit more about what ancestral medicine means for you and how does that play into your work?
That's kind of a heavy question. I
Oh,
love it. Not heavy, it's
okay.
just it's asking me to really, really feel because um to me, ancestral medicine helps me understand who I am
Mm,
and what my body quite literally is, what my body thrives on doing. So for me, ancestral medicine is so many things. It can be, the way that our ancestors ate. I
mhm.
think that is usually a direct correlation to the foods and the eating habits that are most aligned with us here today.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
for sure.
Ancestral medicine looks like culture. And for me, so this bush woman, this bush heritage is even a mix. There these communities that my maternal grandmother and her ancestors came from were a mix of West Africans who were brought to the Caribbean, but also indigenous people that were already there. And just for history's sake, there's been a long lineage of imperialism and colonialism around the world.
Sure.
So what happened in the Caribbean and many islands is that the West Africans that were brought there to do labor and the indigenous folks who were sort of also being corralled into the same thing, they banded together and decided to create free sovereign societies.
Mm,
Um,
wow.
and it was a devotion to ancestral medicine, their ways of living,
Yeah,
living in harmony with the lands, prioritizing community, owning their means of production.
yeah,
And so two cultures really fused and created something of their own where part of the pride in being, so they call them maroon societies or people of the
mm,
bush. Part of their pride and the cultural identity that came forth was not being part of the imperialist machine.
yeah,
Um, Going out and living in the bush, the wilderness of wherever they were, and learning to live off the land so that they could have societies that were not reliant on whatever else was going on.
wow.
It's kind of, I feel like this is what we were gifted in the beginning of human history. There's
Mhm,
this
mhm.
story of the Garden of Eden that we've all heard, despite any religious affiliation that we have. This like idea of there's like a perfection and this innocence when we're allowed to just be.
Yeah, yep.
So this is really what they fought for, even in this new land, or when there were these invaders coming in. The devotion really was to that sort of original design. We
Mm,
have healthy families, healthy communities, we're living in harmony with the earth, and we work for the well-being of everyone. These
yes.
days, when you say that, it kind of sounds idealistic, and it can, because we're living in a modern world and not everyone wants to farm and weave their own clothing. I understand that, but I feel like that spirit still lives in me and influences the way that I live and show up as much as I can in this time today.
Oh, I can second that because I follow you. And I see that, and that's one of the things I love about how you show up and your embodiment. And I encourage all the listeners will share Deja's contact information and her social handles so that you can also follow her. You can also find her in the list of people that I follow on Instagram if you hop over there. But there's just something so powerful and primal about that. And you really do, you live this path. And I love that about your work. I mean, some of the things that you've already mentioned, ancestral medicine, somatic healing, herbalism, living in harmony with the land, womb healing, sexual healing, feminine business, and even like owning your means of production, all of these things I feel like are a huge part of what you do. So how do you know, like when a woman comes to you, how do you decide how to weave all of these elements together, or which things to weave together in her work with you? How do you, I guess, like there's so much that you have. How do you decide what to apply at what point in your work?
Mm. It all starts with where I am in my life and my own
Mm-hmm.
personal work.
Mm-hmm.
That usually influences what I offer to the world.
Yep.
Yet there are instances where someone will come to me. This happened last year, actually, where I was working with two women who were expecting, and
Oh,
I hadn't done that professionally before. I'd helped my grandmother with certain things when I was younger, but I didn't consider myself a doula or
yeah.
any of that. And looking back now in retrospect, I can see it's because I was doing a lot of deeper work with my womb and
Mm-hmm.
really planting the seeds for the future that I see for myself, which
Yes.
does involve family and children. Um, but when someone comes to me, it first starts with a conversation to see what they're looking for. And then it's an honest assessment of where I'm at, if I have the space for it.
Mm-hmm.
And if I feel like I can be in integrity with this person.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes we think that we're ready for things like mentally, or we feel like we should have hit this or should be doing something. And that can sort of cloud whatever
Mm-hmm.
whatever we're working on. So it's looking at myself, understanding where I'm at and if I can serve with integrity.
Mm.
And from then, if I do feel like I can, then I look at, my offerings, so things that I've shared with the world before, and I call on my teachers.
Mm.
So I've been trained with my grandmother in this bushwoman heritage, yet I've studied under many teachers around the world in yoga and Ayurveda and Buddhism, because I feel like they have that similar ethos that I see in bush medicine.
Yep.
It really is about like this, I don't want to say balance because we're never fully balanced, but this harmony, this integrity, this integration between all aspects of life. So I will really um, turn to this team that I work with as well and see, okay, how can we really show up for this person? I've done a lot of work in the past where I was the only teacher, and that works for some seasons. But I've realized now, as I'm serving other people, that it's bigger than me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like this paradox, this dichotomy. Like, yes, I'm good enough, and this happens in entrepreneurship. I'm worthy to receive for this, and there are other people who can serve in ways that I can't, even if we're teaching the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many facets to these things. But it sounds to me like that actually fits in with the ethos of this community you were speaking about earlier, where making community a forefront of a way of life is part of the vision. So that sounds so beautifully aligned to me that you would create these partnerships and do this. And when you're working with women, what do you see most often? I mean, I realize that there's probably a huge spectrum of things that women come to you for. People always start out somewhere. Something has compelled them, in a sense, to seek support, or maybe they've been following you on Instagram or something like that. But what types of issues or concerns or desires are you seeing as themes among the women you're working with these days? What are they coming forward with for this ancestral healing?
For the women who I work with, they reflect a large part of my own journey. So
Of course, right?
I had this really great upbringing, learning about all of these things, and yet it was it wasn't the path that I chose initially. Um,
Ooh.
in the Caribbean, there's this very interesting thing that's happening. We have a lot of the old ways and elders who are willing and ready to share their wisdom if people want it. But we're in a global society,
Yeah.
and I see for the younger generation, even myself, we thought that success was leaving home, going to the US or Europe, and working in corporate, making a lot of money, and
Mm,
living a modern lifestyle. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong about that lifestyle. I just found that for a while I was chasing that dream, I became disconnected in myself.
mhm.
I
Yeah.
I didn't really forget, but I was disembodied in everything that I learned growing up. Um,
Yeah.
I would take an Advil instead of like drinking mango leaf tea for a migraine.
Mm,
I was on medications for anxiety and depression, and I realized what happened to me. Like I just looked at myself and I realized I don't even know what's going on in my body. The foods that I'm eating, the environments that I'm in is so different from what I'd
yeah.
known.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted, but I just didn't feel like me. So at that point, that's when I sort of came back to myself and all the things that I learned. And that is the same point which women come to me.
Mm,
They're very successful, they can do all the things. They've probably like left home, either a small town or another country, and
yeah.
came somewhere where they thought they would be successful, and they have reached that in certain aspects, but they realize that they're disconnected from their body, from their self.
Hmm.
They're stressed out, but they're over medicated or over caffeinated, so they don't even really know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they want to feel like women again.
Hmm.
I hear that a lot because with that modern lifestyle and chasing the success and the corporate ladder, many women do put themselves on birth control or some sort of contraceptive.
Yep. Hmm.
And it helps. I'm using air quotes, you can see,
Uh-huh.
but it,
Oh,
it
I can hear
helps
them.
them. It helps them because, okay, very physically, they're not getting pregnant and they might feel like that's a hindrance to them at some point. But what they don't understand is that on that physical level, birth control puts our body in this false state of it's like our luteal phase, so right before our period, but we're just paused there.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going through the whole
Right.
cycle. And our
Yeah.
body needs to be healthy, but also
Yeah.
but also what's the word? Like emotionally speaking, they also feel emotionally stifled.
Mm.
Creatively speaking, they feel stuck, even though they got to this job that they wanted. They reached six figures in their business, and this is what they wanted.
Yep.
So all of this comes together, the work, the money, the what medications they may be on, their womb, and it's this space of I work so hard for this, but I don't feel good. So
Yep.
what's next? I don't feel like a woman. I'm not creative because I feel like that is a deep part of being feminine. We're creative, we're vibrant, we're dynamic, we're always changing in
Yep.
reflection to what's going on in our womb. But I also think it's something else too. It's like this spirit. that we all have.
Mm-hmm.
So
That
they
is so
come
true.
they come to restore that.
That is so beautiful. And I think so many women can relate to that. I want to ask you some questions about this process, not about like what you actually do with clients, but like for women who have maybe hit that point where they're realizing that's where they are. Well, I definitely want to unpack that. So we'll go back there for a second. But I just wanted to kind of reflect a little bit on what you said about birth control in particular. I think it's so interesting that you mentioned that because, like most, I shouldn't say most, like many young women going through a phase similar to what you described, where we had a certain kind of upbringing or certain gifts we were given, let's say, in our heritage, and then we moved away to do something that was more what society was currently saying would make us successful and lost touch. During that season, early in that season for myself, I also was this was years ago when I was in my first marriage, but I was on birth control and it messed my body up very badly, and I actually had to quit taking it because I was nearly suicidal. Actually, it messed up my emotions, and I've never been that way before, and I've never been that way since, and I hope I never experience again what I did on that medication. That particular form of birth control was actually later it was banned. There was a lawsuit,
Mm,
but that was a lesson to me, even though it took me many years to really fully return to my femininity and to plumb the depths of it. That was a very big lesson to me about how some of these types of things can be creating unnatural. I mean, isn't that really all of modern life in a sense, is creating um this unnatural life cycle? Like that whole thing about pausing the luteal phase, I feel like modern life just does that, where it puts you in these unnatural cycles, literally, and that affects so many other things in the body and the heart and the emotions. So do you find that you have to work with a lot of women who are um, going to need to rethink how they're handling some of these things in their lives, especially with medication? Like, are you able to help people with that shift where they're able to transition off of dependence maybe on some of these pharmaceuticals? How does that work for you in your work?
it's a very touchy thing.
Sure.
I will not advise anyone to stop whatever medication they're on, not outright,
Mm,
because physiologically speaking, they are creating these chemical and neurological pathways within the body
yep.
that we do become dependent on. You
Mm,
know, if someone, for example, they're unable to sleep, because maybe at the root it's because of a hormonal imbalance,
yeah.
and they're taking Ambien or Lunesta to sleep
Mm-hmm.
and wake up at a proper time. Disrupting that, even with the best of intentions, can be also jarring for the body.
Yeah.
We
Sure.
Our natural state is wellness. I deeply believe that, and the body is always working towards that. Yet we can create patterns of dependency in the body that make the body feel safe. And the restoration process, in order for it to be sustainable, I mentioned sustainable legacy before,
Mhm.
um, we have to go slowly in some cases, and really focus on how is this playing into that person's life.
Mhm. Yeah.
How will their body, let's say, react to weaning off? Um,
Mhm.
and it's also very tricky because, pharmaceuticals and medications are governed by the FDA, at
Yep.
least in the US, and other very official entities, and I'm not an official entity
Sure.
in
No,
in
totally
that
understood. I
sense.
get it. Totally hear you.
But
Yeah.
I am there to support people and create alternative structures if that is what they should want. And usually the women that come to work with me, that is what they want. They realize that they're taking a medication that is addressing a symptom and not the root.
Mm, mm-hmm. Yep.
So for those who may be taking, let's say, birth control, that's usually a general thing that I see. We first start with identifying why they're taking it. Because for
Yeah.
some people, it may be about contraception. Some people may be acne,
Mm-hmm.
or like there are all of these other reasons that people are assigned medication, prescribed medication, without being educated on the root cause of whatever symptom guided them to that choice. So I start there, identifying the why. And then slowly we start to implement little measures and practices to help them address whatever's going on and see. I have them talk to their doctor because that is like their official medical license provider in the West
Yep. Yep.
about
Sure.
weaning off or changing it so that by the time they eventually do phase off of whatever medication, there is something else to hold them and to support them.
Mm, mm-hmm. That is such a beautiful point about something else being there to hold or support. I think sometimes, and I think this probably plays into much of your work, like we're not always aware in the modern era, especially as women, what alternatives there are, even ancient ancestral structures to hold and support. We don't even have any sense of what those are because we are so separated from our lineage in many cases. So it's amazing to me that you get the opportunity to introduce women to supports and structures that are there, alternatives for them that maybe they would never be able to find on their own or wouldn't know how to engage with on their own.
I feel like I'm at this very interesting point in my lineage right now where I can practice and share openly, but
Mhm.
also receive like prosperity from it. Um,
That's amazing.
and I guess a little about the history. So these maroon societies that were formed were outlawed. So they weren't seen as sovereign, they were just seen as rebels.
Right.
And at one point, up until the last century, maybe 1970s, 80s, healers were deemed as witches.
Yeah. Oh, yep. Pretty much every
Yeah,
culture.
yeah,
Yeah.
they were. For the Caribbean, it was until like the 70s, 80s that we call them obia women. That's the negative term for what a bushwoman is. An obia woman, if you were caught practicing, you would be sentenced to imprisonment. That's still much in the culture today. It's not so drastic that you'll go to prison, but that
Wow.
fear is still there. And it's always interesting for me to see because, my grandmother and my great grandmothers, they did this. Not so much my mother, she chose that modern route. Um, but they were always so sweet and loving, and I felt so safe with them. And to
Mm,
see other people of the society have this respect and fear
yeah.
was very interesting. And these women didn't get paid, at least not officially. Sometimes people would do trades or bring them chickens or eggs, like
Yeah.
whatever's going on. But I feel like now this space that I'm in my life is almost cleansing the lineage. There's no more fear or shame or
Hmm.
not believing in the work. It's it's understanding that this has survived for so long and it is coming through me because the world needs it right now.
Yes.
Because so many centuries they've tried to stamp it out, but it has survived. So I have to believe that it's God who's wanting this to be
Hmm.
uh of service in the world.
Amen to that. I talk a lot about the hiddenness of the feminine and how that has been a protection, for so long. But I think there are so many instances right now where we are being given that divine permission to pull back the veil a bit
Mhm.
and to practice, and that there is a safe space to be unhidden, I guess, to be more visible. And that is such a privilege to be, I mean, of all the generations of women who were in some senses hidden, or perhaps not hidden so much in the community, but not validated by that wider sphere, for you to be the woman in your lineage who gets to cleanse, or that, that away in a sense, or reclaim that, or walk that in that openness, is really powerful. And like, I every time a woman shares kind of a similar journey, like where she's the first in her lineage to really feel like there's no more fear around practicing openly, that's something to be celebrated, I think. Um and also the work I would imagine you've had to do yourself personally, even to claim that safety and that sense of openness. I know you mentioned earlier that you didn't choose this path right away, like you maybe did some other things before coming back to this calling. How did you know that you wanted to come back into this ancestral work and carry this on? What was that moment like for you when you made that decision?
It was humbling,
Hmm.
and I was met with a lot of resistance within myself. I
Mhm.
thought I was too smart to choose this. I
Oh,
was
yeah.
like, I am
Yeah.
a modern woman. Why am I choosing to do this? Um, and even with my family, I was met with some resistance from a few people at first. You know, this is the
Mhm.
work of poor people in the country. Essentially, this is what I was told.
Mhm.
Um, is that your cat I hear?
Yes, we get sounds of life sometimes. My older cat just rolled in and she's growling at the kitten, so
It's funny. Yeah,
uh,
it was very humbling and jarring. I came into it slowly, just for myself at first.
hmm,
Um, but it got to a point where people were asking me what I was doing. Like, you look
yeah.
different. You seem different. It's like that beingness of the feminine. Like, what are you doing? Whatever you're on, I want it.
Yep, yep.
And I remember I was still in college at that point in my last few years. And I remember I served as sort of an RA in the dorms. And people would come to my room. First, it was like one person, then two at a time, and they'd bring their friends. And then I would be hosting 6 to like 10 young women in my little room. They're all drinking this herbal tea blend that I made. I have candles lit. We're talking about what's going on in their life. I'm guiding them through breathing and moving. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing right now?
Yeah.
But people wanted more and more.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know all these years later that I would still be doing this in a more, I guess, official way. But here I am.
Here you are.
Mhm.
And perhaps in some ways it's a result of choosing to be, and the path of being has unfurled in this way. I know you notice you mentioned
Yes.
about beingness a lot, and the being has perhaps unfolded the doing, I guess, maybe in some senses.
Now, yes. When I was younger, and I'm still I'm still quite young, but in my very early years of life, I did everything early. My doing was everything.
Mm-hmm.
I acted very quickly. I went to school early. I graduated early because I wanted to become someone
Yeah.
who was not me, essentially,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
because I thought that would make me happy or successful or respectable. But at the core, the things that I wanted, I've received. At the core of everything, I wanted to meet exciting people, learn about different cultures, help others with whatever skills or services I had. The
Mm-hmm.
package just looked a lot different than I thought I would receive.
Always not the truth. Always.
Yes.
Oh, now I know you mentioned quite a bit about the womb and not just for women who are preparing to birth, but for women in general. So, can you tell me a little bit more about what womb healing or womb work means to you and how you approach that as part of this whole package or way of life?
For me, womb healing is cultivating or restoring the innate fertility and creativity in a woman.
Mm-hmm.
On that biological level, we are fertile and we can create life up until a certain point of our life. But outside of that, the womb space is where we bring everything to life. It really is a creative portal that we can use to, birth a business, maybe birth a home or dream home, a career. There's nothing that is off limits to the womb. I think
Mm-hmm.
that the womb is so special because of its innate ability to create something that is not yet existing in the world. Like all that comes from the womb is really coming from another place and time.
Yeah.
And then we see it in the 3D.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what my intention is for this work. I really love it. Yet ultimately, if I'm doing this work correctly, then I will eventually be out of a job.
Right, right.
And
Same
then
here.
I'll find something else to do. Maybe I'll start making watercolors. I don't know. But it
Uh,
is, yeah, it's restoring women to that space of just infinite fertility and creativity.
Infinite fertility and creativity. That is so beautiful. And that was the hunger and cry of my heart for so many years as I was on my healing path, because it was for many years, it was very hard for me to access, as I was coming back into my beingness. Um, it was like a slow trickle over time where more and more of my creativity, more and more of my spontaneity, my flow would come back. And I know for so many women, that is such a challenge, is that feeling, along with the modern life, along with all of the things that we've spoken about, all these unnatural cycles and things we find ourselves, caught up in, maybe trying to live a life that is not really us. All of that is that sense of barrenness, of being unable to birth the things that come from some other place. And I love that you said that about what we are able to birth through the womb. It just made me think of, I was reading an ancient Syriac prayer, so totally different cultural context. I was reading this prayer the other day that talked about how Mary gave birth to the Ancient of Days, which of course is a divine title, or the title of that which is divine from the Hebrew. And it was interesting because in that moment, like, I had this thought that what if all the things we birth out of our womb are actually ancient because they're coming from this eternal place, and we're the vessel that bears them. And so when you said that, it kind of like made me think about that connection of how everything that comes through our womb is so sacred and it is coming from the divine. um and we get to be the birth giver of those things. So um for a woman who's like brand new to this type of process, like maybe she's waking up to the fact that she's feeling very dry or barren in her life, or unable to connect with her being, or unable to connect with her creativity, at the moment that she's, let's say it's like the moment that she's realizing this, between that moment and the moment that she calls someone like you for support, what would you say to her? Like what is the first thing to do or intend or whatever? Let's say do. What's the first thing to do when she realizes, really consciously realizes, I'm not on my path. I've lost my way in a sense. I'm disconnected from that verdant and fertile part of myself. Like what do you say to a woman who's just waking up to that?
I tell her to sit with herself,
Mm, that's good.
to
Mm,
really see. It's with presence and stillness that the truth comes forth.
mm-hmm.
When we have let go of
Mm,
all the distractions that are keeping us numb,
mm-hmm.
then we can see, oh, I'm not drinking wine with my dinner tonight,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel empty.
Mm-hmm.
What void is that I'm trying to fill? I'm not going out to, I don't know what people do. I'm quite introverted, but I'm not going out to a club. I go out
Right.
sometimes, but I'm not going out to a club tonight. Hmm. Why
Mm,
am I yearning for that attention? It's when we give ourselves that space to just witness, then usually we see what the next steps are.
mm,
We
mm-hmm.
see that vice that's present, that maybe we didn't think was so serious before. We see that memory that we've been ignoring because it was too painful. And then we are able to move forward from an empowered place rather than feeling like I need to be fixed. It's like, how can I? This is what I really hope that people are having with themselves, this conversation. How can I be myself with awareness? Because we all have our vices. We all have those little qualities that make other people tick. We are human. We are perfectly imperfect. But when we know ourselves, it makes life easier. If we know that we have an addictive personality, let's say, it allows us to create structures that ensure we are properly stimulated and using healthy outlets for that energy. I really tell my clients when I work with them, there's nothing wrong with you. You don't need to be fixed.
Yep.
You just need to learn how to be you with
Mm-hmm.
proper support, because
Mm,
that's the most sustainable thing.
yes. Learning how to be you with proper support. I love that. And isn't that one of the greatest traps that we face as women when we wake up to the fact that there is something that we wish to evolve, shall we say, in our lives, or reconnect with, that tendency to feel like we're broken or that something needs fixed.
Mhm.
And that, you know, and moving beyond that, or shifting out of that belief system, is almost a form of medicine in itself. I feel cures a lot of ills,
Mhm.
just on its own. So on that, let's talk a little bit about the somatic healing, because I know this comes into it as well when we're dealing with the womb and the ancestral medicine. You mentioned that movement has been a big part of your work. What does that look like for you? Is that more of the yoga or dance, or how do you see that coming into this journey toward learning to be yourself?
I'm a natural mover.
Hmm.
Both of my parents were very athletic. They still are, but less so. They've played sports all throughout their childhood and up until adolescence, and they exercise. So I've always had that sort of awareness of physical fitness. But beyond that, I've danced with my grandmother since I could
Oh,
walk.
wow.
She she's a dancer. She used to sneak out of her house at 14 years old and just go dancing in salsa clubs. And she tells me, don't worry, I didn't drink or smoke anything. I just needed the music. And I
Hmm.
don't know what actually she did, you know. She was young. I'm not here to judge her, but I can relate to that. Um, as long as I've known her, she would have music on if she could. Music in the car, music in the kitchen, in the yard. And I was her little buddy, so I was always dancing with her, and she was always showing me. I think it's a very Caribbean thing, but always showing me how to move my hips. And we call it wind your waist. So it's kind of like it looks like belly dancing almost. And isolations. And telling me, you know, here's how I do it. And then she would hold my waist and move mine. And she's like, you have to find your own rhythm.
Wow.
So from very young, I always knew what my natural rhythm was and how I felt in my body when I was loose and open. And I find that I always come back to movement of any sort to find my rhythm.
Yeah.
So I do love dancing. I grew up dancing a lot of cultural dances, but also I've been trained in ballet and jazz. I've ballroom dance. I just find
Oh,
that moving is my most natural state of being.
yeah.
That was my first language, dancing. So it just feels the most special to me. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm my best self when I'm dancing. There are no pretenses. I'm not thinking of what words to say or, my tone really. I'm just being. So for me, I do love to in my work guide my clients through dances and yoga flows. I'm a yoga teacher, but I also encourage them with that structure that I provide to find their own rhythm. They might not want to practice yoga the rest of their life. That might not be sustainable for them. Okay, how do you like to move? What makes your body feel free and open?
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the medicine. What comes through naturally for you. And that structure is very nice, when we talk about the archetypes um in my work, I think similar to you, we teach on that polarity between the
Mm-hmm.
masculine and the feminine.
Yep.
So for movement, I do provide that masculine structure of classes and videos and practices, but I also want to invite that creativity, that flow.
Mm. That's beautiful. And yes, it is such a, actually, you've spoken about so many masculine concepts, but in that way of holding that space, right? The support, structure, guidance, creating that safety, that like all of that is such a beautiful, energetically such a beautiful masculine gift, that all of these things and support the feminine to really flourish and be her most vibrant, amazing self. And it's funny when you mentioned about dance and asking people, like how do they like to move or feel the most free. I remember when I first started on my own, when I was waking up to the realization of how I felt disconnected from something, which was my femininity, really. But I didn't really have a name for it in the beginning. I Someone asked me that, and I literally could not say what kind of movement or in what movement context I felt the best or felt the most natural, because I literally was so disconnected from my body. Um I couldn't even describe that or pinpoint it because I didn't have enough experience to really know. So I think it's really beautiful whenever women are coming from a place where, like you said, movement is like your first language or dance is like your first language, and that familiarity and that history that you have then allows you to be that guide and hold that safe and structured space for women there in that journey. Like, how often would you say, I mean, is it common? Because I think there's women like I was, and they're out there, they might be listening to this interview and thinking, oh, I would love to reconnect with my body, but like I feel so disconnected, or I've never felt connected. And sometimes we feel isolated. Like I used to think I was the only person in the world, or the only woman in the world who felt that way, because it seemed like women around me were just so comfortable with their bodies, and I never was. Um, and I had this false idea that no one else felt that way. So is that common, when you're working with women, to find that there's that sense of discomfort or being ill at ease with the body?
That is common, but it's not normal.
Right,
This is
right.
this
Yeah,
is what I share with them. It's common, but it's not normal.
exactly.
And there are so many reasons why a woman might feel disconnected from her body. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there, there are some women who come to me who it's because there's something that has happened to their body that was traumatic,
Yeah.
and reconnecting would bring up that pain,
Yep.
and they're not sure of how to deal with it. It's like Pandora's box. When you open it, you don't really know all that's in there. And so that is a big part of the work that I do, holding the space for them to witness, but then also implementing and integrating practices to move with it. In order to heal, we do have to feel and go through
Mm-hmm.
those emotions and those memories that
Mm-hmm.
that get stored in the body. And it can happen in a safe space when you're guided, or, and this happens more often than not, it can happen when you are totally taken by surprise, triggered, and everything
Mm-hmm.
just has to come out. And this is what some people would classify as a psychiatric break or spiritual awakening. Depends on how you look at it.
Totally, totally.
But that does need to move. So I feel like the one pattern that I see with women that I've worked with is some sort of sexual healing
Mm-hmm.
um is being called for. So this looks like many things. So on one level, it could be just feeling comfortable being a sexual being.
Mm-hmm.
Some might have experienced religious programming where they think their body is like sinful,
Yeah.
or that it's not right for them to be sexual. Others have had traumatic sexual experiences that are looking to be transmuted and integrated.
Mm-hmm.
But no matter where they fall on the spectrum, that is a big theme. I've seen in my own personal experience and in my professional experience that that sexual energy has been, I don't want to say robbed from women, but it's the seat of our power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it ties back to that fertility I was speaking about earlier. Yes, we're biological sexual creatures, but sexual energy itself is creative energy. That's what helps us like birth and build what we desire. So when a woman is disconnected from her sexual energy, she's connected from her creative energy and her spiritual energy as well. They're all very linked within us.
Hmm. Yeah, that is so true. I think it's one of the greatest way that power is not meant to be ensure that women remain disconnected is through that um that I don't know what word I'm looking for. I don't usually struggle for words, but I'm struggling here. Like just this diminishment of that connection with this sexual power and sexual energy. Having that connection is such a gift.
I think in a very healthy way too.
Hmm.
What I see also within that spectrum are women who are intending to restore their sexual energy, heal it, because they thought that being sexually empowered meant being sexually promiscuous. And then they
Um,
realized, oh, maybe I wasn't so empowered. And
yeah,
I feel drained.
yeah.
Like I let too much into my field.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that is a really powerful point that um, there's such a delicate relationship and close relationship between our energy and our sexuality, the body. Like we're impacted on so many levels in any kind of sexual experience in ways that we may not even be aware of at first, but we feel the effects later, shall we say.
Mhm.
Mm.
And the reason I think this comes up in my own work time and time again
Mhm.
is because of that reflection. You know, our clients are a reflection of some part of us, and part of what disconnected me from my body, besides the hustling and chasing success, was some sexual abuse as a young girl. And
Mm.
that was something it took me almost 2 decades to really come to terms with
Wow.
and begin the healing process.
Hmm.
So, although I've shared that part of my story, I think when I first started doing the work, and I don't do it so much anymore, I have here on this podcast, but it's interesting that I think it's that beingness. There's some part of that I've transmuted that I don't speak about, but people can feel, and it comes up when we're doing the work together. I'll say, "Hey, I've experienced this. I don't know how to deal with it." And I just kind of I just laugh. I'm like, "Oh my, thank you, God." Again,
Hmm.
there's a reason I had this as part of my journey, so that I can be of service to others in that way.
Hmm. Hmm. That is powerful, and thank you for having the courage to share that. Um, it's so important for women to hear and to see the model of women who have walked that transmutation journey, um, not just healing, although that is such a huge part of the journey, but transmuting and allowing that pain to become now a form of power that is there for you, but then flows outward to bless those that you work with as well. And I think it's part of what makes you such a powerful supporter and practitioner as well in your work. And um, speaking of that, because you do have so many ways that you work with women, I know you have a few things going on right now. You have one-on-one coaching, you have some courses for women who are anywhere on this journey. Maybe they have been through a traumatic sexual experience and they spent a long time processing it, but it's still not, gotten to the point where they've really been able to feel that sense of transmutation. Maybe they're living that busy modern life and they feel disconnected from the feminine, or just want to dig into ancestral healing methods across that spectrum. I know you do business work as well. What are you offering right now for women who are ready to, or listening and saying, this is a woman I need to connect with right now?
Okay. So I'm currently having rolling enrollment. That was a lot of R's. Rolling admissions, I guess,
There you go.
to a program that I love. It's called Returning to the Feminine. And
Mm,
this is for that boss babe, that hustler who's looking to restore her original feminine blueprint.
yeah.
This is a live program where I work with these women one-on-one. There are also group sessions. But everything is designed to help them heal their body of trauma, deepen into their femininity, and create a sustainable legacy. So
Amazing.
this really encompasses everything that I do, because there's some of that somatic work with the body. There's a lot of that womb work. There's some ancestral work too that we bring in to um, really awaken those ancient gifts that we all have.
Yeah.
And then there's that business and career work where we restructure um, their lives to really create that sort of, I call it a sovereign life. As women, we are in a very unique space in history where we can make our own money and run businesses and have a career, yet it doesn't mean we have to lose our femininity.
Yes.
So I love that. That's all about that integration that is live. And then I have some self-paced courses as well. And this is more so for the beginner.
Awesome.
I have Liberate and Embody Your Inner Child, which is a 16-part self-paced course designed to help my clients transmute those childhood experiences and find the wisdom, right? This is a lot of the work that I did to transmute my own experiences. It is really cool. You get access to the community to hold you as you go through this at your own pace, and you have it for life.
Mm.
And then I have a womb wisdom bundle, and this is a combination of really core offerings that are designed to help women connect to their heart, their womb, and their sexual energy.
Mm.
So there's a workshop in that, a little ebook, a few somatic practices, and that is just like a deep dive into the womb. Yeah, that's what I have offering so far.
Ooh, Kitty's excited.
But if you just want to know more and see all the options, then I'll have my website, dejashania.com, in the show notes,
Yes.
and you can just explore whatever your heart calls you to see.